So this month we chose the theme of hospitality. And the reason for that is this week, if you didn't know, it's Refugee Festival Scotland. So events are taking place all over the country, and you'll find all about the different events on the Refugee Festival Scotland website. Now, Refugee Festival was set up recognising that people from refugee backgrounds make up a huge contribution to life in Scotland, and that this should be celebrated. So it brings people together to meet, mix and share art, culture and ideas and get to know each other better. And this is one of the events that is taking place from Interfaith Scotland for Refugee Festival. And the theme of the festival is hope. In difficult times, hope offers not only consolation and aspiration, but also a rousing call to action. And at a time when people seeking safety in the UK are facing hostility and fear, there is no better time to reflect on what different faiths have to say about hospitality to the stranger and to those in need. So we're really looking forward to hearing from the Christian, Muslim and Jewish perspective on that theme of hospitality and what it means also in practical terms for showing hospitality to others. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, known to many of us here, Sister Isabel Smyth. Sister Isabel is a Roman Catholic nun, a sister of Notre Dame. She established the Scottish Interfaith Council in 1999, which is now our charity Interfaith Scotland, and has been involved supporting the work of interfaith dialogue for many years. She's also sat on a lot of other interfaith bodies as well, including the Church's Agency for Interfaith Relations in Scotland, the UK Church's Commission for Interfaith Relations, and she's also the Scottish Catholic Bishops' Associate Secretary for Interfaith Relations. So anything with a long name, Isabel's involved. She worked in teacher training for 20 years and co-taught the master's degree in Interfaith Relations in Glasgow University. She also incidentally writes a very interesting blog very regularly called Interfaith Journeys. So over to you, Isabel. We look forward to hearing what you have to say from the Roman Catholic Christian tradition.
Thank you, Frances. I'm really glad that you said when you started that it isn't necessarily an account of, hospitality from any one tradition. These are just thoughts that came to me as I thought about it. So let me just give you my thoughts on the subject. The first thing that occurred to me when I think of hospitality is that it's a universal virtue. I mean, it's a deeply human activity to welcome family and friends into our homes to share food and drink. And I mean, it's these get-togethers that deepen friendships and relationships. And it's what gives us a sense of family and community identity, I think. And I always feel very privileged when anyone asks me into their home. And even I think I feel very privileged when I'm invited into other faith communities to celebrate events such as marriages or whatever, and to celebrate festivals. The word hospitality is connected to the Latin word hospes, which can mean a guest or a host. And I believe that in Spanish, the word is the same word for both guest and host. And so there are two ways really to experience hospitality. One is as a host, where we welcome and we invite others into our lives, either into our homes or our community, or even our nation, as is the case with immigrants or refugees, even though we know that at the moment many of them are not welcome. It's not quite as straightforward as that. But also we do receive hospitality when we are guests and we then enter into the world of another. And it seems to me it's important to think of being a guest as it is to think of being a host. Certainly for me, whenever I enter into the home or the community of another, it can feel very familiar, but it's not quite home. There's always something strange about it. I can remember growing up and going to my aunt's and even staying there. And while I felt at home and it was family, still wasn't, they didn't do things just quite the way I did them. In the Christian tradition, in the letter to the Hebrews, it actually says, "Do not neglect to show hospitality to the stranger, for by doing so, some have entertained angels without knowing it." Now, this is likely to be a reference to stories such as that of Abraham in the book of Genesis, when he welcomed 3 strangers into his tent and waited on them while they ate. And these strangers, these 3 men, turned out to be angels. Now, these stories aren't unusual in religion. There are many stories told in different religions where an unexpected visitor is a messenger from God, or even God's self. And perhaps this is a good way, I thought, to look at all who come into our lives, or even the unexpected moments in life as they arise. In Paul's letter to the Romans, chapter 12, he suggests, or he tells us what extending hospitality to strangers is about. It says there, we should rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep, and live in harmony with one another. Now, Pope Francis, as some of you will know, often speaks of harmony and fraternity. And for those of you who are conscious of language, forgive the word fraternity. Pope Francis believes that listening is an essential part of hospitality. It is only by listening, he says, that we can respect the personhood of guests and know something of their history, their concerns, and their beliefs. It's only when we listen will a person feel at home, and will we recognize the spiritual gifts that they have to offer us. There's a story in the Gospel that some of you will know about 2 friends of Jesus, good friends of Jesus, Martha and Mary. It would seem that Jesus was often a guest at their house. And in the Gospels, the story that is told is of Jesus at their home, Mary sitting at the feet of Jesus listening to him, and Martha running around being very busy serving the meal or whatever. And of course, she begins to complain a little bit because there she's doing all the work and Mary is sitting doing very little. And so she complains. But Jesus says to her, "Martha, you're busy about many things, but Mary has chosen the better part." Now, many people have given interpretations of this story and, just to say what meaning did it have. But one of the meanings that Pope Francis has given it is, he says that what Martha has forgotten is that the essential thing about hospitality and entertaining is the person of the guest. Not necessarily what you give or what you offer or what you do, but simply being aware of them and listening to them. In the first letter of Peter, we're told, "Be hospitable to one another without complaining." Now, Martha obviously didn't know that at the time. "Like good stewards of the manifold grace of God, serve one another with whatever gift each of you has received." Now, this in a way can be quite consoling, that we are called to be hospitable according to our gifts and our resources, and we will all do it in different ways and have different things to offer. What Pope Francis really wants is that we should cultivate a hospitable heart. He believes that this hospitable heart is essential for interreligious dialogue and for world peace. In April this year, he told a delegation of Buddhist monks, "Let us continue to work together to cultivate compassion and hospitality for all human beings, especially the poor and the marginalized." And Pope Francis hardly ever talks without mentioning the poor and the marginalized. In Iraq, fairly recently, he was talking again about fraternity, and he said, "The journey to peace begins with the decision to have no enemies. There will be no peace as long as we see others as them and not as us." Now, this separating humanity into them and us is obvious in the wars and conflicts throughout the world, as well as the tensions within our own faith communities, where one denomination can often be suspicious of the other. For me, coming, I suppose, being a Catholic of Irish descent, Northern Ireland would be a very good example of this. And you may have seen a series of programmes on television. In fact, I think the last one may have been last night, about the situation in Northern Ireland. It listened to the stories of people's experience and the hatred that there had been between Catholics and Protestants. But eventually in Northern Ireland, a desire for peace turned enemies into friends. This was the case with Martin McGuinness. And Martin McGuinness had been a member of the IRA. He served alongside his once upon a time enemy, Ian Paisley, as the Deputy First Minister of Northern Ireland. They had been enemies and they discovered that they got on very well together. In fact, they were called the Chuckle Brothers because of their shared humour. When Martin McGuinness died, President Bill Clinton spoke at his funeral of how he had reduced the them and widened the us. I think, for me anyway, this is an encouragement that such a thing is possible. And also for me, an inspiration, and I hope for all of us, to make this a focus for our work of dialogue. It shows that hospitality of the heart can make strangers and even enemies into brothers and sisters. Nowadays, we would want to expand this beyond the human to include all sentient beings and the very planet on which we all live and depend on for life. In Matthew's Gospel, chapter 25, Christians are told that it is not religion that will save us, but how we treat one another. This is the yardstick for our relationship with God. What we need is a heart as wide as the world. This is what will save the world and redeem it from the xenophobia, hate, and suspicion that keeps us apart and ignites so much violence and conflict. So why don't we do it? Thank you.